in the heart of New York City's glittering chaos, where skyscrapers pierce the indifferent sky and the relentless tide of humanity surges forward without a backward glance, an old woman crumpled to the sidewalk like a discarded leaf in autumn, her frail body, wrapped in threadbare rags that whisper forgotten hardships, trembled as she extended a withered hand toward the passing throngs. "Please," she rasped, her voice a fragile thread barely audible over the cacophony of honking taxis and hurried footsteps. "Help me. I can't breathe." But the city, that merciless beast, paid her no mind. Businessmen in tailored suits sidestepped her without breaking stride, their eyes glued to glowing screens. A group of laughing tourists snapped selfies against the backdrop of Times Square's neon blaze, oblivious to the human wreckage at their feet. Even the street vendor nearby, hawking pretzels and dreams, averted his gaze, muttering under his breath, "She shouldn't be here. Probably just another scam." Little did they know, this dying woman harbored a secret that would unravel their worlds like a pulled thread on a tapestry of fate. Her name was Eleanor Voss, once a pillar of quiet strength in a small Midwestern town, now reduced to a shadow by the cruel grip of terminal illness and abandonment. As her breaths grew shallower, her mind flickered back to the son she had raised alone after his father's untimely death. A boy with eyes like storm clouds and a mind sharper than any blade. He had left home decades ago, driven by an unquenchable ambition that propelled him from poverty's clutches into the echelons of unimaginable power. Unbeknownst to the indifferent crowd, Eleanor's son was none other than Alexander Voss, the enigmatic tech mogul whose company, Voss Innovations, controlled the very algorithms that dictated their daily lives, from the ads that stalked them online to the security systems guarding their homes. Alexander, now a billionaire recluse atop his glass tower just blocks away, had long ago severed ties with his past, bearing the pain of his mother's sacrifices under layers of corporate conquests. But on this fateful evening, as Eleanor's pleas dissolved into the urban din, a young intern from a nearby office finally paused, her conscience pricked by the woman's desperate eyes. Kneeling down, she dialed emergency services, her voice steady amid the growing curiosity of a few onlookers who now formed a loose circle, more out of morbid interest than genuine concern. Paramedics arrived in a blur of sirens and flashing lights, whisking Eleanor away to the sterile halls of St. Mary's Hospital, where doctors fought to stabilize her failing heart. Word of the incident spread like wildfire through social media. A viral video capturing the moment of her collapse, hashtagged with hashtag forgotten elderly and hashtag city indifference. Miles away, in his penthouse fortress, Alexander scrolled through his feed during a rare moment of downtime, his fingers freezing as the grainy footage played. The face on the screen, age broken, but unmistakably his mother's, sent a jolt through his armored soul. For years, he had convinced himself that she was better off without him, that his rise to power justified the silence. But now, as regret clawed at his chest, he realized the gravity of his neglect. With a single call, he mobilized his vast resources, private jets, top specialists, and a team of investigators to trace every soul who had ignored her cry. The first to feel the ripple was a businessman who had stepped over her. His company's stocks plummeted overnight, courtesy of a subtle algorithmic tweak in Voss's search engines, burying his firm's visibility in digital oblivion. The tourists found their social media accounts mysteriously shadow-banned, their vacation memories vanishing into the ether. The vendor awoke to find his card impounded for health violations that appeared out of nowhere, enforced by city officials suddenly eager to please an anonymous donor. But Alexander's vengeance was just beginning. He delved deeper, uncovering the layers of societal apathy that had allowed his mother to suffer in plain sight. As Eleanor lay in her hospital bed, tubes snaking across her fragile form, she whispered to the nurse about her son, her words laced with a mix of pride and sorrow. "He'll come. He always finds a way." Meanwhile, Alexander boarded his helicopter, the blade slicing through the night air as he raced toward the hospital, his mind a whirlwind of plans. Not just to save her, but to expose the city's underbelly of indifference. He envisioned a foundation in her name, funding shelters and awareness campaigns. But first, there would be reckonings. The intern who had helped receive an anonymous scholarship, her life transformed in an instant. Yet as Alexander's chopper descended, a darker thought crept in. What if his mother's condition was beyond even his influence? The hospital loomed ahead, its lights a beacon in the darkness, and as he stepped out, the weight of lost time pressed upon him like an invisible force. Entering her room, he saw her eyes flutter open, recognition dawning amidst the haze of medication. "Alex, my boy," she murmured, a faint smile cracking her parched lips. He knelt beside her, grasping her hand, vowing silently to make amends. But outside, the city pulsed on, unaware that the son of the ignored woman was about to rewrite its rules. In the days that followed, Eleanor's story exploded across headlines, fueled by Alexander's strategic leaks to the press. Reporters swarmed, piecing together the tale of the tech titan and his forsaken roots. One by one, those who had turned a blind eye began to receive cryptic messages, invitations to charity events that were in truth veiled confrontations. The businessman, now facing bankruptcy, arrived at a lavish gala only to find himself face to face with Alexander, who leaned in close and whispered, "You stepped over my mother like she was trash. Now, feel what it's like to be discarded." Shaken, the man pledged his remaining assets to homeless causes, his reputation in tatters. The tourists, their online presence erased, scrambled to rebuild, only to discover job offers vanishing and loans denied, all traced back to Voss's invisible web of influence. Even the vendor, relocated to a better spot with grant from an anonymous benefactor, learned the hard way that kindness costs nothing, but ignorance can bankrupt the soul. As Eleanor's health stabilized under the care of the world's best doctors, flown in at Alexander's expense, she and her son began to mend the fractured bond. Late-night conversations in her private suite revealed the depths of her loneliness and his guilt, forging a new chapter in their lives. But Alexander's quest for justice extended beyond personal vendettas. He launched a global initiative called Echoes of the Ignored, using AI to detect and respond to real-time cries for help in urban areas, turning surveillance into salvation. Yet, not all was forgiveness. A shadowy figure from Alexander's past, a former business rival who had once mocked his humble origins, emerged, sensing an opportunity to exploit the vulnerability. Whispers of a lawsuit circulated, claiming Alexander's manipulations were illegal, but he was always one step ahead, his algorithms predicting and countering every move. As the story unfolded, the city transformed subtly. People began to pause to help, fearing the unseen eyes of power. Eleanor, now recovering in a luxurious estate overlooking the Hudson, watched her son's empire grow even stronger, infused with humanity it had long lacked. But one evening, as Alexander sat by her side, an urgent call came in. A similar incident in another city, an old man begging for aid, ignored by the masses. This time, though, the son was no ordinary man. He was a high-ranking government official with ties to international espionage. Alexander's network flagged it immediately, and he dispatched aid, but not before realizing the parallels to his own tale. The official, grateful yet furious, reached out, proposing an alliance that could shake global politics. Together, they uncovered a network of corruption that had left the vulnerable to rot, leading to arrests and reforms that rippled worldwide. Eleanor's influence, once silent, now echoed through boardrooms and legislatures, her near-death experience the catalyst for change. Yet amid the triumphs, a lingering mystery nagged at Alexander. Why had his mother been in the city that day? She had always shunned the urban sprawl, preferring her quiet town. As he dug deeper, he discovered letters she had sent him, returned unopened, pleading for reconciliation. The guilt deepened, but so did his resolve. One crisp morning, as they walked the state grounds, Eleanor confided in him about a long-lost sibling, a daughter given up for adoption during their darkest days of poverty. "Find her, Alex," she urged, "before it's too late." Armed with his technological arsenal, Alexander set out on this new quest, tracing leads through databases and DNA records. The trail led to a successful lawyer in Chicago, unaware of her origins, living a life of privilege that mirrored his own. Approaching her cautiously, he arranged a meeting under the guise of a business consultation, only to reveal the truth over coffee in a sunlit cafe. Shock turned to tears, then to tentative joy as the family reunited, Eleanor's eyes sparkling with a vitality that medicine alone couldn't provide. But the reunion unearthed old family secrets, a hidden fortune from Eleanor's late husband, stashed away in offshore accounts, now threatened by greedy relatives who had caught wind of the windfall. Alexander, with his sister's legal expertise, fortified their defenses, turning the tables on the opportunists with a series of calculated exposures that left them penniless and disgraced. As the Voss family grew stronger, their story inspired a best-selling book and a Hollywood adaptation, with Alexander overseeing production to ensure authenticity. Yet, in the quiet moments, he reflected on that fateful sidewalk, wondering how many other Eleanors still begged in vain. His next venture, a fleet of drones equipped with AI to patrol cities, offering immediate aid and alerting authorities. The first test run in New York saved a child lost in the crowd, earning accolades and skepticism in equal measure. Critics decried it as overreach, but supporters hailed it as revolutionary. Amid the debate, Alexander received an anonymous tip about a corporate espionage plot targeting Voss Innovations, orchestrated by the same rival from before, now allied with foreign interests. Diving into the intrigue, he uncovered a web of deceit that extended to government levels, forcing him to navigate treacherous alliances and betrayals, with his mother's wisdom guiding him. Power is a tool, not a crown. He outmaneuvered the threats, emerging not just victorious, but with evidence that toppled corrupt officials. The scandal dominated news cycles, positioning Alexander as a whistleblower hero, though he knew the cost. Enemies lurking in shadows, waiting for their moment. As Eleanor celebrated her full recovery with a family gathering, toasting to second chances, a storm brewed on the horizon. A mysterious letter arrived, postmarked from an unknown location, hinting at yet another family secret. A lost artifact from their ancestors, said to hold immense value and danger. Intrigued, Alexander assembled a team, embarking on an adventure that blended treasure hunt with personal discovery, from ancient archives in Europe to hidden vaults in Asia. Along the way, they encountered rivals, puzzles, and revelations that reshaped their understanding of heritage. Back home, Eleanor, now an advisor to the Foundation, mentored young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, her experiences fueling their dreams. One protege, a brilliant coder, developed an app that connected volunteers with those in need, amplifying the Echo's initiative. But as success mounted, so did jealousy. A hacker collective targeted the system, aiming to dismantle it for sport. Alexander's countermeasures were swift, turning the attack into a trap that exposed the perpetrators, leading to their arrest and a boost in public trust. Through it all, the bond between mother and son deepened, a testament to redemption's power. Yet, as they stood on the estate's balcony one twilight, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, Eleanor turned to him with a knowing smile. "There's more to come, my boy. Life stories never truly end, they evolve." And indeed, a new chapter beckoned when Alexander's sister announced her run for public office, vowing to champion the ignored, with the family support propelling her campaign. Opposition was fierce, with smear tactics and dark money flowing, but their united front proved unbreakable. Victories in primaries led to national attention, positioning her as a force for change. Meanwhile, Alexander's drones evolved into a global network, partnering with NGOs to aid disaster zones, saving countless lives. A particularly harrowing mission in a war-torn region brought him face-to-face with the human cost of conflict, inspiring a pivot toward peacekeeping tech. Collaborating with a government official from earlier, they developed non-lethal tools to de-escalate crises, earning Nobel buzz. But personal trials persisted. Eleanor's health, though stable, required ongoing care, reminding them of mortality's shadow. In a poignant moment, she shared her bucket list, leading to family travels that healed old wounds and created new memories. From the pyramids of Egypt to the auroras of Iceland, each destination wove richer threads into their tapestry. Upon returning, Alexander faced a boardroom coup attempt at Voss Innovations, engineered by insiders envious of his distractions. With cunning strategy and loyal allies, he quashed a rebellion, restructuring the company to prioritize ethical AI. The shakeup attracted top talent, innovating breakthroughs in healthcare, like personalized treatments that could have saved his mother earlier. As the family empire expanded, so did their philanthropic footprint, establishing scholarships, hospitals, and community centers worldwide. Eleanor's story became a beacon, featured in documentaries that move millions to action. Yet, in the midst of acclaim, a ghost in the past resurfaced. Alexander's father wasn't dead, as believed, but faked his demise to escape debts, now seeking reconciliation and to share the wealth. Skeptical, Alexander investigated, uncovering a life of regret and redemption in obscurity. The confrontation was tense, emotions raw, but forgiveness bloomed slowly, adding another layer to their complex legacy. With the family whole in ways unimaginable, they turned their gaze to the future, launching a space initiative to monitor Earth's vulnerable populations from orbit. As rockets soared, carrying their vision skyward, Alexander whispered Eleanor, "It all started with you." She nodded, her eyes alight with pride, knowing their saga was far from over. The first satellite in the Vos constellation reached low Earth orbit on a crisp October dawn, its golden solar rays unfurling like the wings of some mechanical angel. From the mission control bunker buried beneath the Hudson estate, Alexander watched the live feed with Eleanor at his side, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. The bird's primary instrument was not a camera for pretty pictures, but a hyperspectral scanner designed to detect the heat signature of a single human body against cold concrete, even through cloud cover, even in the concrete canyons of the world's megacities. They called it Mercy. Within 72 hours, it had already located a collapsed refugee in Beirut, a stroke victim in Lagos, and a missing child in Sao Paulo. The alerts pinged directly to local responders and, when governments were too slow, to the private rapid response teams Alexander had quietly funded across 6 continents. But power of that magnitude casts long shadows. 3 weeks after launch, an encrypted message arrived on Alexander's private server. No subject line, only a single frame grabbed from Mercy's raw feed. A nighttime thermal image of the official archives did not contain. It showed a courtyard in Xinjiang, rows of kneeling figures, guards moving between them. The timestamp was live, 8 minutes old. Beneath the image, 3 words in plain text. How much longer? Alexander felt the old chill crawl up his spine, the same one he used to feel when rival coders threatened to leak his source code in the early, lawless days. He traced the packet through 14 hops, onion layers peeling away to a dead end in Moldova. Someone had routed the satellite's ground station for less than 4 seconds, just long enough to mirror a classified pass and vanish. The breach that's surgical could only come from a nation-state or from someone who had once sat at his own table. He did not tell Eleanor everything, only that a bug needed patching. She studied his face the way mothers do and said, "Be careful whose ghost you wake, Alex." That night, he flew to Reykjavik under an assumed name and met a woman he had not seen in 12 years, Dr. Lin Zhao, the architect of his original encryption lattice, the one who had walked away the day he pivoted from pure research to weapons-grade surveillance contracts. She looked older, harder, her hair now shaved on the sides, a tattoo of binary crawling up her neck. "You built God's eye," she said without greeting, sliding a cup of black coffee across the table. "Now the devils want to turn." She laid out the consortium, a loose alliance of intelligence directors from 3 permanent members of the UN Security Council, plus 2 Gulf sovereign funds and 1 reclusive mining oligarch who controlled half the world's cobalt. They had watched Mercy save lives on CNN and saw only the ultimate panopticon, unilateral, untouchable, owned by a single family. Their opening offer had been polite. Sell them a backdoor key and receive permanent immunity plus a quiet island. Alexander had refused through back channels. The second offer arrived as a demonstration. The Moldova breach. Proof they could hijack the constellation whenever they wished. The third offer, Lin warned, would not be an offer at all. Alexander listened, expressionless, then asked a single question. "Who inside my house talked?" Lin's silence was answer enough. He flew home through a storm that rattled the Gulf Stream like a toy. In the cabin, he opened the sealed envelope Lin had pressed into his hand. Names, dates, offshore account numbers. The mole was not some low-level sysadmin. It was Marcus Hale, his chief financial officer, the man who had cradled newborn Voss Innovations in its incubator days, the man Eleanor still invited to Thanksgiving because he has no one else. Marcus had been quietly leveraged after disastrous crypto speculation. The consortium owned his debt and, through it, his conscience. Alexander landed at dawn, kissed his mother's forehead while she slept, and went straight to the sub-basement war room. By noon, he had frozen Marcus's accounts, revoked his credentials, and dispatched 2 former Shin Bet operators to escort him from his Hamptons mansion. Marcus arrived pale and sweating, expecting termination in every sense. Instead, Alexander sat him down in the glass-walled conference room overlooking the river and played the Xinjiang clip. For 137 people, Alexander said quietly, you sold them for $32 million in bearer bonds. Marcus broke, of course. Names, drop points, planned sabotage vectors. He begged for protective custody. Alexander granted it, inside a black site medical wing, where doctors would keep him alive and talking for as long as necessary. But the damage was done. The consortium accelerated. 2 nights later, Mercy 3 suffered a sudden attitude control malfunction and began to deorbit over the Indian Ocean. Ground control wrestled it back into stability with minutes to spare, but the message was clear. They could kill the birds whenever they chose. Eleanor found Alexander in the observatory at 3 a.m., staring at the starfield display as if it had personally betrayed him. She brought 2 mugs of chamomile and sat beside him. They're afraid of you, she said. Fear makes men stupid, but it also makes them ruthless. You can't fight nations with drones and algorithms alone. He laughed, a hollow sound. Then what do you suggest, Mother? Forgiveness? I suggest you remind them what happens when they touch a mother's child. The next 72 hours unfolded like a chess game played at light speed. Alexander leaked fragments, never the full Xinjiang footage, just enough infrared silhouettes and geolocation stamps to ignite human rights NGOs and campus protests from Berkeley to Berlin. Hashtags rose. Embassies scrambled. Public pressure forced the consortium's political patrons to distance themselves, creating hairline fractures Alexander could exploit. Simultaneously, he executed a maneuver no one saw coming. Every Mercy satellite carried a dormant secondary payload, microthrusters, and a hardened quantum communicator developed under a DARPA Ghost contract he had quietly acquired years earlier. At his command, the entire constellation executed a synchronized burn, shifting from sun-synchronous orbits into a new shell that placed him directly over the territorial waters of neutral micronations who had sold him exclusive air rights for cash and scholarships. The birds were now, legally, in international airspace, untouchable by any single government's kill vehicles. The consortium raged, but their hands were tied. To shoot down a humanitarian satellite in neutral orbit would be an act of war against the entire global commons. Check, not checkmate. Yet, Alexander knew retaliation would come sideways. It arrived disguised as a philanthropic miracle. A glossy new foundation, backed by 2 of the consortium princes, announced $1 billion grants for elderly care in 20 major cities, complete with their own surveillance fleet branded Guardian Angels. The press adored it. Politicians posed for photos. Within weeks, their drones outnumbered Mercy 10-1, and the public, exhausted by scandal, sighed in relief and looked away. Eleanor watched the news with narrowed eyes. They're going to use kindness as camouflage, she said, while they build the cage. Alexander nodded. He had expected no less. That night, he gathered the family. His sister, the senator, the newly found lawyer sibling, even the repentant father who had begun earning fragile trust, and laid out the real war plan. Not a battle of satellites, but of narrative. They would infiltrate the Guardian Angel network the way a virus slips into a healthy cell. The coder protege Eleanor had mentored, a shy 22-year-old from Detroit who went by the handle Raven, had spent years studying Voss code the way pianists study Bach. Under Alexander's supervision, she spent 6 weeks in a cabin in New Brunswick writing a polymorphic worm so elegant it could hide inside a firmware update and bloom only when it detected specific biometric distress patterns, racing heartbeats, collapsed postures, the subtle tremor of fear. The worm did not destroy. It redirected. Every time a Guardian Angel drone witnessed abuse, neglect, or state violence and failed to alert independent authorities, the footage would quietly duplicate itself to a decentralized mesh Alexander had woven through university servers and church basements worldwide. Indelible, untraceable, public. They released it on a Tuesday. By Friday, the first clip surfaced. A nursing home in Florida where residents were left in soiled beds, a migrant detention center in Texas where children cried unheard, a re-education facility whose coordinates the worm cleverly obfuscated just enough to evade immediate retaliation. Each video carried the same watermark, a simple line drawing of an old woman reaching out. Beneath it the words, "She should not be here." The internet broke open. Protests swelled to millions. Stock markets punished consortium princes. Governments toppled in miniature. And somewhere in a hospital room that smelled of lilies and hope, Eleanor Voss watched the feed on a tablet. Tears tracking silver down weathered cheeks, whispering over and over, "That's my boy." But Alexander was already moving to the next square on the board, because Raven, trembling with exhaustion and triumph, had just discovered something buried in the Guardian Angel source code, a kill switch labeled Eleanor Protocol, set to activate on a date 3 weeks away. When triggered, every drone in their rival fleet would broadcast a single command of vulnerable medical implants, pacemakers, insulin pumps, deep brain stimulators for Parkinson's, across the entire Western Hemisphere. Maximum output instantaneous. A silent, perfect massacre disguised as simultaneous equipment failure. And the signature embedded in the code was unmistakable. Marcus Hale's private key, used after Alexander had supposedly stripped him of access. Marcus hadn't just been a mole. He had been the architect of checkmate all along. Alexander stood in the war room, lights dimmed to blood red, and felt the weight of every life his mercy had saved now balanced on the edge of a blade. 3 weeks to find Marcus. Really find him this time. 3 weeks to trace the dead man's switches. 3 weeks to turn the weapon back on his creators before the woman who taught him what love meant paid the final price for his ambition. He looked up at the live feed of Mercy Eye, 7 drifting above the Atlantic, its golden wings catching the sun like a promise, and spoke to the empty room. Then let's go to war. The war room pulsed with a hum of servers, their fans whispering secrets into the dim light like conspirators in a shadowed alley. Alexander Voss stood at the center, his eyes reflecting the holographic projections of satellite orbits and encrypted data streams that danced across the air like fireflies in a digital storm. 3 weeks. 21 days to dismantle a doomsday machine woven into the fabric of his enemy's empire. Marcus Hale, the traitor who had once been a brother in arms, was the key. But Marcus had vanished, his protective custody a smokescreen that dissolved under scrutiny, leaving only echoes of his betrayal. Alexander didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every tick of the clock was a heartbeat closer to activation, a symphony of potential death for millions whose only crime was vulnerability. He rallied his inner circle. Raven, the prodigy coder with fingers that blur over keyboards like lightning. His sister, the senator, pulling strings in smoke-filled Capitol rooms. The lawyer's sibling, dissecting legal loopholes with surgical precision. And even his father, the prodigal Ritter-Nee, whose street smarts from years on the run proved invaluable in tracking underground networks. Eleanor, though frail, became the strategist supreme, her bedside transformed into a command post where she pored over maps and timelines, her voice a steady anchor in the chaos. "Remember, Alex," she said one dawn as the sun bled gold over the Hudson, "wars aren't won with weapons alone. They're won with hearts." The hunt for Marcus led them through a labyrinth of false trails, dummy corporations in the Caymans, encrypted chats on dark web forums, burner phones discarded in Vienna alleyways. Raven's polymorphic worm, now evolved into a sentient hunter, infiltrated the Guardian Angel drones, sniffing out digital breadcrumbs. It struck gold in Zurich, a penthouse suite where Marcus holed up, guarded by consortium mercenaries. Alexander dispatched a Black Ops team, ghosts in the night who extracted him under a hail of silenced gunfire. Marcus, battered and broken, spilled everything in the interrogation chamber beneath the estate. The Eleanor Protocol wasn't just a kill switch. It was a symphony of sabotage designed to frame Voss Innovations as the culprit, toppling Alexander's empire while the consortium rose from the ashes. With the codes in hand, Alexander orchestrated the counterstrike. At midnight on the eve of activation, Mercy Eye's satellites aligned in a celestial phalanx, beaming override signals into the rival fleet. Drones across the globe stuttered, their malicious payloads neutralized, repurposed instead to broadcast the truth. Live feeds of consortium atrocities, sweatshops and hidden factories, political prisoners and black sites, environmental devastations funded by their billions. the world awoke to a digital dawn of reckoning. Stock exchanges crashed as investors fled. Governments launched inquiries. Crowds surged in streets from Beijing to Boston, chanting "She shouldn't be here" as a battle cry against the unseen overlords. But victory tasted bittersweet. As the consortium crumbled, their final gambit unleashed, a cyber tsunami aimed at Voss servers, threatening to erase everything. Raven fought back in real time, her code a shield of fire, but the assault pierced defenses, corrupting Mercy Eye's core. Alarms blared. Satellites began to falter, their golden wings folding in orbital death spirals. Alexander raced to the observatory. Eleanor wheeled beside him, her eyes fierce with unyielding spirit. "Fix it, my boy," she urged. "For all the ones like me." In a frenzy of inspiration, Alexander fused his father's old-world ingenuity with Raven's tech wizardry, rerouting power through the Family Space Initiative. The Voss constellation, still nascent, became a lifeline, linking with the failing birds in a mesh of unbreakable quantum bonds. The system stabilized just as the first drone plummeted, burning up in atmospheric glory, a phoenix sacrifice to save the flock. The counterattack reversed the tide. Consortium networks imploded, their leaders exposed and arrested in dawn raids coordinated across continents. As the dust settled, the world transformed. Echoes of the ignored swelled into a global movement, with Mercy Eye now a United Nations-endorsed guardian, its AI eyes watching over Forsaken. Alexander's family, once fractured, stood united on the estate's grand balcony, toasting under a canopy of stars. His sister ascended to higher office, championing laws that mandated corporate compassion. The lawyer sibling founded a firm dedicated to justice for the voiceless. His father, redeemed, mentored at-risk youth, teaching them the value of second chances. And Raven? She became CTO of Voss Innovations, her innovations birthing a new era of ethical tech. Eleanor, her health a miracle of advanced treatments born from the crisis, authored a memoir that topped bestseller lists, her words a lighthouse for the lost. From a sidewalk plea to a symphony of change, she wrote. One ignored cry can echo forever. Hollywood clamored for rights, but she insisted on authenticity, casting unknowns who embodied the struggle. The film premiered to thunderous applause, its climax a heart-wrenching recreation of her collapse, intercut with the global uprising it sparked. Yet, in the quiet afterglow, Alexander knelt before his mother one starry night. "It was all for you," he whispered. She cupped his face, her touch a balm. "No, my son, it was for us all. For every soul who whispers, 'Help' into the void." The story of Eleanor Voss rippled outward, inspiring art installations in city squares, sculptures of reaching hands that lit up with messages of aid. Schools taught her tale in empathy curricula. Apps born from her foundation connected billions in networks of kindness. Alexander's drones evolved, not just patrolling skies, but seeding clouds for rain in drought-stricken lands, purifying water in forgotten villages. The consortium's fall birthed a new order, transparent alliances where power served people, not the elite. As years unfolded, the Voss legacy became legend. Eleanor's grandchildren, born from unions forged in the fire of adversity, grew up in a world where indifference was the true crime. Alexander, graying but unbowed, launched the ultimate venture, a lunar outpost monitoring Earth from afar, ensuring no cry went unheard across the cosmos. Eleanor lived to see the first boot print on that dusty surface. Her image beamed back in holographic glory. In her final days, surrounded by love in the estate that had become a sanctuary for the healed, Eleanor gazed at the horizon. "We did it," she murmured. Alexander held her hand, tears mingling with smiles. "You did it, Mother. You shouldn't have been there, but because you were, the world changed." Her passing was peaceful, a gentle fade into eternity, but her spirit ignited eternal flames. Monuments rose in her name, parks where the homeless found homes, hospitals where the sick found solace. The phrase, "she shouldn't be here," evolved from lament to mantra, emblazoned on billboards, whispered in prayers, shouted in revolutions. Alexander, carrying her torch, ventured further. Interstellar probes etched with her story, broadcasting humanity's redemption to the stars. Viewers and listeners, drawn into this epic, felt the pull, the drama of betrayal and triumph, the thrill of tech-fueled justice, the heart-wrenching bonds of family. It wasn't just a tale. It was a call to action, a mirror to society's soul.